Hi, it's Dwyer. It is May 1st, 2025. GamblersAdvisory.com, a free site. BettingAngle.us, a free site. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, folks, the world has changed. Certainly the world of boxing. Right? Just to understand, at a time when you have tariff wars, you have countries struggling, you have a negative GDP here in the United States. The Chris Eubank Conor Benn fight, incredibly to me, and I tip my hat here to Eddie Hearn. Somehow this fight pulled over 1 million pay-per-view buys. 1 million. Right, folks? We need to realize too that a world championship was not at stake here. Chris Eubank was not the middleweight champion. Right? Conor Benn, hell, he wasn't even the welterweight champion. Right? You didn't even have two guys here from the same weight class. When I heard of this fight, I thought, wow, this is a reach. I was wrong. This was a big success. Let's talk about the fallout because it's going to be considerable. First of all, both Eubank and Conor Benn have now had financially successful boxing careers. Both guys, if they want, if they had a share of the pay-per-view, both guys could walk away from the sport. They've been paid handsomely. Now, I don't expect either guy to walk away from the sport, but let's talk further here. Because of this pay-per-view bonanza, right? Now Canelo has no reason to fight David Benavidez. Right? He has a 4-fight deal with Riyadh, right? Turkey's group. His first fight's going to be William Skull. His second fight is going to be Terence Crawford. Now he has a blockbuster fight. Blockbuster. He could fight it next May. He could fight it next Cinco de Mayo against Chris Eubank if he's interested in brand extension. Canelo against Eubank at Wembley easily clears the 1 million pay-per-view buys they got on this fight. Right? That crowd would probably be 80,000 people. Understand, Chris Eubank is actually, just from a boxing standpoint, one of the best opponents Canelo could go up against because Eubank is highly skilled. He could not fight the fight he just fought against Conor Benn, where he's leaning over the pocket continually against Canelo. All we have to do is remember Billy Joe Saunders leaning over the pocket against Canelo and getting his eye socket busted up. Right? But understand, Eubank is that rare fighter who can show up like Crawford and fight a completely different fight. Eubank can lean backwards. Eubank can hide behind a jab. Canelo would have to come find him. Eubank can be defensively blessed. Right? Just understand, Canelo, Eubank, that's a fight that technically would be a great fight to me. Right? The biggest part of this Eubank-Conor Benn fight was the fact that the fight itself was highly entertaining. Right? This million plus pay-per-view audience was entertained. That's more important to boxing than anything else. This was the big fight that delivered. Right? So understand, there's going to be an outcry, especially if Canelo destroys Terence Crawford. There's going to be an outcry for Canelo against Chris Eubank. That'll give Canelo an opportunity to dodge some dangerous men out there. Right? Diego Pacheco is at 168. He's dangerous. Christian Mbili, he's dangerous. Right? I believe Hamza Shiraz would beat Canelo. Right? Shiraz is now at 168. He's dangerous. The crowd would show up for Eubank, who fought this fight just a smidge above middleweight. In other words, Canelo doesn't even have to go into the choppy waters. Right? He can stay in the jacuzzi off at the side. He can stay in the jacuzzi and fight a guy who hasn't fought at his weight class in recent years. Right? And still make a boatload of money. Right? So just think it through. Conor Benn. My advice to Conor Benn is take the win. I know he technically lost the fight. Folks, this fight had no losers. Conor Benn was a welterweight who gained weight to fight at 160 pounds. He was courageous. This fight enhances his career. Doesn't detract from it. It enhances his career. It gives him a certain credibility he did not have before. Understand, after a fight that gets this level of gate, Benn can go back to 147 and can fight, you name it. If Ryan Garcia blows out Rolly Romero, right? And understand, that fight's a light switch in my mind. Right? Rolly Romero is a puncher. Understand, he fought Gervonta Davis. Gervonta Davis was cautious. Right? Davis is hardly throwing any volume because he understood that if he was reckless and got caught by Rolly, there's no going back. Right? Ryan Garcia, of course, out of boxing for a year. Let me be diplomatic. He's busted for PEDs. I consider PEDs like I do drunk driving. In other words, you see a guy in a car who is drunk. He's busted that time. How many other trips did he take where he was drunk behind the wheel where he wasn't busted? Right? We simply don't know. I don't care what the, denials are, right? Every athlete says, what? Me? Juice? How? Right? Bottom line is, we don't know how intense Ryan Garcia's relationships with PEDs were. We only know that he got busted in his last fight. Right? You have some A-plus level trash talk going on right now, where Devin Haney's father, when he sees Ryan Garcia, says he's skinny. The muscles are gone. Right? The inference is that the muscles were PED created. Right? Garcia really can't say much to him, because Garcia was formerly busted with Osterin in his system. Right? So understand, Ryan Garcia, who's not defensively blessed as it is coming back off a layoff and perhaps off a PED regimen. Right? We don't know what fighter's going to show up against Rolly Romero. He's much more subdued. Right? Now, if you're in Ryan Garcia's camp, right? Ryan Garcia has one of boxing's best trainers, Errol Spence's old trainer, and perhaps Ryan Garcia used the last year to sharpen his skills. That's a distinct possibility. Right? Baby Garcia shows up Maybe, Garcia doesn't have an extensive relationship with PEDs. Maybe Ryan Garcia is more dedicated to his craft. Maybe it'll show, right? If Garcia looks good, a Conor Benn Garcia fight would be spectacular. Because understand, Garcia's a guy who waits for you to jump in so he can throw that left hook on you. Right? That's his game. He's extremely fast-handed. He's able to time it so that guys jumping in get hurt. Right? I don't consider Ryan Garcia to be that much of a hunter. This isn't Sonny Liston. He's not going to come looking for you and then throw that left hook. No, he's a guy. He was hyper aggressive in fights like the Gervonta Davis fight. But more times than not, I see Ryan Garcia as a guy who is hanging around. Then you jump in and he hits you with the left hook. Right? Understand, Conor Benn is an ambush fighter. So Conor Benn would be jumping in the pocket. Right? But Conor Benn can get low. Not as low as Chris Eubank, but Conor Benn can get low. It'd be an interesting fight style-wise because of Ryan Garcia's hand speed and because of Conor Benn's relentlessness. Right? Understand, Conor Benn, too, has other options at 147. Folks, Jaron Ennis has been getting hit in fights. Right? He's not the guy who, has a fight and then looks like he's just showered by the time, they have the post-fight interview. No. He's a guy who you notice is getting hit. Right? Now that works until it doesn't. Stanionis, very good puncher. Had Stanionis just leaned into a shot a little bit more. Right? Because Ennis is getting hit flush. Ennis could have been dropped. Now, Stanionis was slow moving, right? Stanionis is, constant but slow pressure, not sudden. Conor Benn is sudden, right? Conor Benn will be outside. Look at the Chris Algieri fight. Conor Benn will be outside, then he's leaping in the pocket. You leap in the pocket at the right time on a guy who has Ennis's defensive lapses. And big things could happen. Right? You also have Brian Norman. Now, Norman's interesting because I think Norman's underrated. Right? Norman, better defense than Ennis these days. Right? Harder fight, perhaps, without the big publicity that a Ryan Garcia or an Ennis fight would have. But still, Norman is a champion at 147. That would be a real fight. Right? Understand, too, stars have really aligned for Conor Benn here. Mario Barrios, and I understand Pacquiao wants a taste of Mario Barrios. But Mario Barrios is a tall guy who gives away his height. So understand, Conor Benn, when he leaps in, would have Barrios' face right in front of him. Right? Barrios is not, Alexis Arguello, where there's a lean and, in addition to worrying about the power, you have to worry about getting through a shoulder and reaching for the guy. No, Barrios gives away his height. Right? Maybe the first round he's, a little bit clever. By the third and fourth round, Barrios is going to be in a firefight. Let's talk about the unspeakable. Manny Pacquiao comes back. Pacquiao's a hard hitter, folks. Right? He doesn't need all the hand speed, although the hand speed's his calling card. Let's say Pacquiao comes back, shocks the world, and beats Mario Barrios. Right, folks? A Pacquiao Conor Benn fight would be off the chain. Not only that, it would be box office gold. You know, food for thought. Maybe what Conor Benn needs to do is to look at Chris Eubank's lifestyle, where Eubank's just waiting. He's not in a rush for a title shot. He's calling out guys. He's studying guys. Then he has the occasional fight. And of course, fans love him. More than 1 million pay-per-view buys. Right? Conor Benn, if he thinks things through, if his top targets aren't available, right? Let's say Jaron Ennis, unavailable. Let's say Ryan Garcia, unavailable for whatever reason. He might want to wait them out. He's already proven that he can get box office in the United Kingdom. Right? These guys need to think about whether they want to extend their brand. Jaron Ennis, Philly, has been fighting a lot in Philly. Nothing wrong with that. Right? You know, the people who supported you on the way up, you know, showcase your talents for them when you're at the top. I don't have a problem with that. But what Jaron Ennis needs to understand is that if he crosses the Atlantic to fight Conor Benn, that's a huge fight. Right? Go to where the culture is, where folks are getting 40,000+ people for a fight. Right? That's where the big payday is. Also, Jaron Ennis needs to realize that once you get to the UK, it's hard to leave. Right? There are going to be other cards there, as you can imagine. You know, if Tyson Fury comes back, if Anthony Joshua fights again, if, you know, Joe Parker, a Kiwi who's in the UK, you know, continues to fight. Think about where Jili Zhang, a guy who lives in New Jersey, fought Joe Joyce twice. With an active boxing community in the UK, Jaron Ennis could go there, extend his brand, fight a Conor Benn, make a mint, stick around, be featured on some premier undercards. Right? Food for thought. So this is a game changer. It really changes boxing. Right? 1 million pay-per-view. Folks, I'm not sure if Ryan Garcia on a great card is going to be able to pull 1 million pay-per-view. Let me also give DAZN credit. They're offering a $90 watch the Ryan Garcia card, watch the Canelo card deal for pay-per-view buyers. Right? That's a coup. That's great for boxing. More promoters need to think of this. In other words, I get to see different cash cows in boxing for one fee. Right? That's spectacular. The way that's structured, that's going to draw a lot of people into the sport. Right? So pay attention to the pay-per-view numbers. Understand, you can look at a fighter, you can say, Conor Benn, he's not champ. If you're serious about figuring out whether a guy has had a successful career, look at the paydays he's received. Look at the eyeballs he's received. Right? Conor Benn just had 1 million people, minimum, pay-per-view, watch his last fight. Right? I always hear people criticizing Jake Paul. I'm thinking, look, the guy had 60 million families watching his Mike Tyson fight. That's a runaway success. Right? Don't get me wrong. Being champion is what people are striving for. Right? People other than Chris Eubank. Being champion is certainly a great accomplishment. Right? But let's not overlook the financial windfalls that fighters are receiving. Right? Because there's not that much money out there, and these are hard economic times. But yet people took the time to watch this Eubank Benn fight. Right? If I'm Benn, I don't unring the bell. I just had a great showing against Chris Eubank. Right? I could walk around the street with my head held high. Someone mentions the Eubank fight. You and I know the judges saw it 8-4. Right? But the mood in the room is that both guys put forth their best games. Both guys made a good showing. I personally am surprised that both Bivol and Beterbiev have decided to do a third fight, right? Simply because both guys want to fight. Both guys could say, hey, I fought him. The two fights they had elevated both guys. There's a lot of money elsewhere, right? My subscribers want to see Beterbiev Canelo, right? Understand, Beterbiev could easily pivot toward Benavidez. Understand, Benavidez used to spar with Bivol. Bivol could say, hey, I want the familiar. I know Benavidez. I've been in the ring with Benavidez. Let me fight him. Right? The problem with third fights is that someone's going to be undercut here. Right? The two guys aren't going to be able to say, well, I beat him once. He beat me once. Right? You saw at the end of the Joe Joyce fight against Filip Ergovic. Joyce beat Ergovic in the amateurs. And Joyce, who blew the line, was basically saying to Ergovic, who actually helped him out in the conversation. That should tell you something about the personalities. Joyce, after losing to Ergovic, basically said, hey, well, it's 1-1. You know, let's have the rubber match, right? Bottom line is, 1-1, everyone walks away a winner. You get to that third fight, folks, you end up with Thriller and Manila type situations. Right? You end up with blood and guts. The guys understand someone's win is going to be erased because they're going to say, oh, this other guy, won the third fight. Right? I'll say, too, think about Manny Pacquiao, Marquez. Right? They fought, 4 times or something like that? By the fourth fight, the guy who makes adjustments is going to have things figured out. Let's remember, when Manny Pacquiao gets knocked unconscious at the end of that last fight, that's the second time in that fight that Pacquiao hit the canvas. Right? If I were Bivol and Beterbiev, particularly if I'm Beterbiev, I would say to myself, okay, number one, I had a knockout streak. Nobody had ever gone the distance against me as a professional. This guy survived the first fight. Then he repeats it the second fight. What's in it for me fighting this guy a third time? I know Turkey and his crew are making it financially worthwhile, but I'm just telling you, there's money other places. Right? I mean, you don't think that a Beterbiev Callum Smith rematch wouldn't draw tens of thousands of people, particularly if Beterbiev, who's already gone to the UK to fight Anthony Yarde, who just beat Lyndon Arthur. Right? In other words, Beterbiev has already crossed the Atlantic to fight in the UK. You're telling me if Beterbiev went to the UK for a Callum Smith rematch, particularly after Callum Smith has beaten Buatsi, right? You're telling me that fight wouldn't draw money? Let me say this too. Let's say these fighters normally get X. Then, of course, Turkey pays them 2X. Well, just to understand, the fighters need to be savvy and think, hey, I can have 2 fights and make this much money. Not only that, if I'm fighting Callum Smith, who I've already fought, I know Callum Smith is going to be in my face trying to knock me out. He's not going to be on his back foot trying to outslick me like Bivol. right? These fighters need to think about styles. They need to think about brand extension. They need to think about the fact that they can get the money with the proper matchmaking and extend their brand, right? Look better winning the fight against the proper opposition, right? Just, food for thought. So I'm surprised Bivol Beterbiev. First, I'm surprised Bivol agreed to the rematch. It worked out for him. I'm surprised both guys agreed to the third fight. That's surprising to me. Let's say if I'm Conor Benn, I look good against Eubank. I always have. The fact that I was fighting Eubank at Eubank's weight, right? This added pressure of having our fathers in the ring, right? Let's put the family hostility to bed, right? There's no unfinished business here, right? I would also be real with myself, and I would think, if one judge has it 8-4, maybe the fight was closer than that. If two judges have it 8-4, you know what? Maybe I got beaten up a little bit more than the press realizes. If all three judges have it 8-4, I would think, that's too much of a hole to climb out of. Right? I would say, look, why am I going to fight some middleweight again who's beaten me 8-4 when I already have positive press feedback? When I've already been part of a 1 million pay-per-view plus event, right? If I'm Conor Benn, I know I have a rematch clause. I don't exercise it, right? How much would I get fighting Jaron Ennis in the UK? Right, folks? Once you have a 1 million plus pay-per-view event that you were in, promoters will put up money to make that fight happen. Right? Jaron Ennis in the UK, Brian Norman in the UK. Folks, those are big money events. Those are title fights. Right? If I'm Conor Benn, I'm thinking, what title is beating Chris Eubank going to give me? Right? How much of this family feud am I going to participate in? Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours in the comment section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.